If you're over 50, these 15 common mistakes might be the reason you're not seeing the gains in muscle and strength that you've been hoping for. But the good news is, if you know what they are and you fix them, you'll finally start seeing progress again. My name is Harlow, and I'm a physiotherapist who specializes in helping people over the age of 50. And I've helped thousands of people of that age group to build muscle and strength. And in today's video, I'm going to reveal 15 mistakes that could be killing your progress when you're trying to gain strength and muscle, and how to fix them. So these mistakes are the same things I see over and over again when I'm consulting clients who are trying to rebuild strength and muscle. And they're also the ones I hear most about in my email inbox and in the YouTube comments. And I thought this video would basically give you a deep dive into them so you can spot them in your own life if you're making them and correct them fast. So there's 3 categories of mistakes we're going to be discussing today. The first category are training mistakes, so things people get wrong either in the gym or in their home exercise programs. The second is mistakes to do with recovery, which is vital for muscle and strength gain. And then the third has to do with your nutrition and lifestyle. Let's dive into it. So the first and arguably most common mistake I see is lifting too light for too long. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let me tell you a quick story and see if you find yourself within this story. So one of the most common things I see people do is they start a resistance training routine. So they decide to join a gym, or they pick up one of my videos and start a home exercise program, which is amazing. They pick a couple of exercises that they know they can do that don't cause them pain. Again, really good. They pick a weight that challenges them between the 10 to 20 rep range. Again, fantastic. So we've got all green ticks at this point. But then weeks go by, and then months go by, and they're still lifting the same weight for the same number of reps. Now, what happened to go wrong here? Well, the first part of the story is totally fine. Everything you've done there is great. You're picking things that you can do, and you're lifting a weight between 10 and 20 reps. It's challenging by the time you get to the end of your set, and you are going to start improving. But once you've improved, if you don't make that weight heavier or you don't do more reps, you will very quickly plateau. And this is where I see people get stuck all the time. They say, oh, I do my 10 reps of shoulder press every day. I've got these dumbbells at home that I use, the same ones each time, and I'm just not getting stronger. My muscles aren't growing. I feel like I'm putting in loads of effort, but nothing's happening. And the issue here is you've not complied with one of the basic principles of resistance training, and that principle is overload. And what overload means is the fact that if you want to improve, you must slowly, incrementally make your exercises harder over time. And you can do that in one of 2 ways. The first way is you can slowly increase the weight you're lifting. So if you start off doing a shoulder press with the 10 kilo dumbbells, in 2 or 3 weeks' time, try doing the 12 kilo dumbbells. We're talking small gains. The smallest increment that you can increase it by, that's what you should do. And it might not be every single week. It might be every couple of weeks, or even just once a month, because as we get over the age of 50, it takes longer before you can actually improve. Your strength gains will be slower. Now, the other way you can make it tougher is you can keep lifting the 10 kilo dumbbells, but you can add a rep here and there. So instead of just doing 10, next time you do 11, time after that you do 12, and just slowly, again, once every 2 or 3 weeks, you add 1 rep to each set. Now, either of those ways would satisfy that principle of overload and mean that over time you get stronger and your muscles will probably grow. But if you get stuck doing the same weight, the same reps, the same number of sets every single week, week on week, you'll improve, then plateau, and just get stuck. So what I'd recommend you do is definitely stick to that 10 to 20 rep range that I often talk about in my other videos, because it's very safe for people over 50 and it will give you gains in both muscle and strength. But every few weeks, try making it a little bit harder. So pick a weight that you can lift 10 reps for to begin with, increase a rep here and there, or increase the weight very, very slowly over time. And that quick fix will probably solve the lack of progress problem for many people watching this video. The second mistake I see is not tracking your progress. And this links very closely to the first mistake. So let's say you go into the gym. You've chosen a gym program to help you gain muscle and strength. You go in there, you're doing your shoulder press with the 10-kilo dumbbells. You do a set, it feels tiring. You put the weights down. Next week, you come back. What's the first thing you do? Well, the first thing you should do is think, how many reps and how much weight did I lift last week, so I can add either one rep or a tiny bit of weight. But if you haven't tracked it, and if your brain's anything like mine, you get in there and think, what weight did I pick up last week? Was it the 7s? Was it the 10s? And how many reps did I do? Was it 10? Was it 11? Was it 12? You're going to get stuck. And this is a big reason why people don't make progress, because they just choose what feels right in the moment. Or if they're having a weak day, they drop the weight slightly. If they're having a strong day, they jump ahead way too quickly. And either of these paths leads to inconsistent or lack of progress. Now, the best thing you can do here is to keep some kind of gym diary. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't need to download any fancy apps unless you want to. I just take a little notebook into the gym, and then I just write down the exercise, the weight I used, and the number of reps for each set. It's simple as I carry it around with me, and it means that if I'm doing an exercise that I did last week, I look at my diary, I see exactly what I did last week, and it's like, right, I'm going to do at least 10 reps because last week I did 10. Ideally, I'm going to hit 11 today on the same weight. Again, that's going to solve so many progress problems for people watching, and it only takes a tiny little bit of additional effort. The third mistake that holds people back from making progress is doing too much cardio. Now, when I say cardio, I mean running, cycling, swimming, anything that increases your heart rate and your breathing rate significantly. And before anyone says anything, I'm not bashing cardio. It's a brilliant form of exercise. It will make you fitter, it will increase your endurance, and it does improve the health of your heart. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it at all. It's just I meet many people who run into the same mistake over and over again. They enjoy their cardio, they know they want to gain strength and muscle as well, but they're not willing to stop running, 3 times, 4 times a week. And I had someone email me the other day and they said, I'm doing 4 runs a week, I'm going to the gym to do resistance training 4 times a week, I don't feel like I'm making progress. I'm doing loads, why am I not progressing? Is there something wrong with me? And the sad fact is, for that person, even though I don't know them, they're probably just doing too much, okay? Their recovery is not optimized. They can't recover from both the runs and the gym sessions because there's no such thing as a recovery run, all right? To recover, you need rest. You can't recover by doing more cardio. So that's a big myth that I see all the time. People are like, oh, my legs are really tired today. I'm going to do a slow run to see if I can get rid of that tiredness. It just doesn't work. What you probably need is rest and maybe some stretching, not a run. Now, cardio can interfere with your muscle gains for a couple of reasons. Number one, it interferes with recovery, as we said, because every time we exercise, effectively what we're doing is gradually breaking down muscle tissue so the body can rebuild it. That also happens with running. It will interfere with the muscle protein synthesis pathways after you resistance train, especially if it's in your legs. So if you're doing a leg workout, then you go for a run, muscle protein synthesis is not going to be the same than if you just went home and rested or just went for a gentle walk. And the other issue here is running and cycling and things like that, they obviously burn calories. And if you want to gain muscle, as we'll discuss later, you need to have enough calories so that you're in a positive calorie balance. You're eating slightly more than you're burning. And it becomes more difficult to do that if you're burning loads of calories by doing cardio. Now, I'm not saying you should avoid it altogether. Absolutely not. I would say that 1, possibly at a push 2 cardio sessions per week is plenty if your goal is to gain muscle. If you just want to get fitter and improve your heart health, then don't listen to my advice. We're just talking today about people who want to gain muscle and strength. But if gaining muscle and strength is your main goal, cardio's got to go on the back burner just for a bit at least. You have to prioritize the thing that's the number one goal. And if it's strength and muscle, prioritize your resistance training at the expense of cardio just for a while. You can always switch back later if you miss the cardio too much. But if you're not recovering, if you feel that you're getting weaker in your sessions rather than stronger, that's a sign that something's not quite right. And if you're one of the people that's doing 3 or 4 cardio sessions per week, try cutting it back and seeing what happens. Now, as a side note, walking, I do not count as a cardio activity unless it's very intense hiking, you know, like up mountains and stuff. If it's just walking, trying to get your 6 to 10,000 steps per day, that does not seem to interfere with recovery. So if you do want to be outside and active and you miss your runs and you miss your cycling, try replacing it with walking instead, which doesn't seem to interfere with gains in the same way. The fourth mistake I see people make is avoiding compound exercises. Now, there are 2 types of exercises you can do in the gym. You can do a compound exercise and you can do an isolation exercise. And an isolation exercise is an exercise that just works one joint and one muscle group. So the bicep curl, where you curl your arm up like this, is a great example of an isolation exercise. It just works the bicep and the elbow flexor muscle group. Doesn't work your shoulders, doesn't work your chest, doesn't work your back. It's just one muscle. Now, a compound exercise is an exercise that works multiple muscle groups and uses multiple joints. So great examples of that are the squat, because you're using your hips and your knee muscles and about 4 different muscle groups. Your deadlift, which you're using your whole back, the whole back part of your legs and your quads as well. The bench press, because you're using your chest, your shoulders and your arms. These are all great examples of compound exercises. Now, there's nothing wrong with using isolation exercises in your workout. Bicep curls, tricep pushdowns, calf raises, things like that all work really, really well. But the issue is they're not very time efficient. And if your goal is to gain as much muscle as possible with as little workout time as possible, compound movements are the way to go, or you should at least prioritize them. Now, the reason people stick to isolation moves is because they're easier, they're less taxing, and they're kind of lower risk of injury usually, because you're very focused. It tends to be that the whole body's locked in one position and you just move one joint. The risk of injury is very, very minimal, where compound exercises are more technical. You have to actually have skill to do them. Someone probably has to show you how to do it. The risk of injury is slightly higher, and they're absolutely exhausting. You know, doing a set of squats, you do 4 sets of squats versus 4 sets of calf raises. I tell you which one I'm blowing more from. It's definitely the squats, okay? And that's why people tend to avoid them more. But if you want real world strength and you want to not be in the gym all day, then compound exercises are almost always what you should start with. So what I recommend people do is split your workout time in half, and for the first half of your workout, just do compound exercises. That might mean you just choose 2, maybe 3 compound movements. You might choose a squat, you might choose an overhead press, and then you might choose a deadlift, or you might choose a squat, a leg press, and a bench press. Something like that would be a brilliant first half workout. And then for the second half of your workout, choose isolation moves, which are easier, and you can use them to bring up lagging body parts that don't feel very strong. Now, I know in my audience that people often notice that their walking slows down over time. One of the big causes of that is weakness in the calves. So you might prioritize some calf training in that second half of your workout. If you don't like your arms, maybe you prioritize some arm training. Or if you don't like your shoulders or your shoulders feel weak, maybe do some isolation shoulder moves like the lateral raise. That way you cover both bases. If you try and do a whole workout with compound exercises, you can do it, but it's absolutely exhausting. And I know personally, if I do that, I start to dread going to the gym. So cutting it in half is a really nice middle ground. Start with the compounds, so you're using your sort of full energy when you're fresh on those, then transition to isolation, and that's a really good path for most people. The 5th mistake I see people make is using poor form from the start. And form just describes your technique when you're doing an exercise. And it's one of the most vital parts of a safe resistance training program, particularly if you're over the age of 50. Now, if you're in your 20s, maybe even your 30s, you can often get away with bad form. You can go into the gym, hardly warm up, use cheating methods to lift more weight, and you'll probably still make progress. I know I did when I was younger. But as you get over the age of 40 and 50, form becomes doubly as important, especially if you're someone who's prone to injuries. Now, if you train with bad form, not only do you risk your gains, you also have difficulty tracking progress because you're not keeping it consistent from workout to workout. There's a big difference between doing 10 reps with good form and doing 10 reps with bad form of any exercise. So if you're trying to progress, it becomes really difficult to track it. But the third reason you don't want to train with bad form is injury risk. And as your form worsens, your risk of injury increases exponentially. And the problem with this is, I see many people over 50 who do really, really well in the gym for months and months and months, but then they push it too far. They pick up a big injury, sometimes even something as big as like rupturing a pec. Then they're off the gym for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Then they have to start all the way back from square one. Now contrast that with the person who stuck very consistently to form, and maybe even if they weren't pushing themselves quite so hard, they avoided that injury that the other lifter got at the 3 or 6 month mark, and they carry on progressing. They just get better and better over time. So it absolutely is key to keep your form good. And I say this to people who are over 50, your number one goal in the gym should not be to gain strength and muscle, it should be to not get injured. Okay, that should be your number one priority. Once you've ticked that off, then you can focus on progressing over time. But to tick off that first part, you need to make sure your form is right. And that's why it's vital to have some outside help. You might want to get a personal trainer to watch you. You might want to consult with a physio like me who can have a look at your form. Or you can join something like my online lifelong mobility program, shameless plug, where I've got videos that walk you through the exercises. You do them in real time with me as I demonstrate on screen, and that significantly reduces your risk of doing it wrong and picking up an injury. If you would like to check out lifelong mobility, there is a link in the description box below, and you can come and join a fabulous community of people looking to gain strength and muscle who are all over 50. The sixth mistake that I see people make is chasing variety over progression. Now, when you first start a workout routine, it's really exciting, you're ready to go, you know, all the exercises feel new, you're getting muscle aches, you're feeling muscles working that you didn't even know you had, and it's just a fantastic time. But if you fast forward 2 months or 3 months, you've been doing the same program, you're trying to make tiny incremental gains with the same exercises, it very quickly becomes boring. And at this point, many people make the fatal mistake of switching it up too much. So they say, I'm bored of that program now, let me do something completely different, all right? Let me stop my squats and start working on box jumps or something like that, totally unrelated to what they were first doing because they were bored of their program. Now, the issue with this is, if you were progressing for the first 3 months and then you suddenly switch it up, you actually might be going backwards now without realizing it. You've changed things up so much, it's almost like a completely different challenge to the body. What you were working on before, you're no longer progressing on because it was such a change. Now, the only alternative to this is to stick with the program and just tolerate the fact that it's going to be boring making these tiny incremental gains over time. And I'd recommend you stick with the same thing for at least 4 to 6 months before you think about changing it. And when you think about changing it, don't change the whole program. Don't start from scratch. Just change a few exercises. And I found in my training, that helps to keep things interesting, even if I'm not revamping the whole program. So if I go into the gym and for a leg day, I normally do, squats, leg press, knee extensions, and some calf raises. If I start to get bored, I might swap the leg press for a walking lunge, keep everything else the same. And just that one tweak, I've changed 25% of that workout, now allows me to progress. I'm still getting stronger on the squat, I'm still getting stronger on the calf raises and the knee extensions. I've brought something new in, which is going to support my gains, and that's something now I can start to progress in even quicker. Contrast that with what most people do is they stop that workout entirely and they say, oh, now I'm going to do Nordic hamstring curls, I'm going to do Romanian deadlifts, and I'm going to do this 10 by 10 crazy German volume training routine that I've seen online because it looks fun. Well, guess what? You're basically just rewinding all the way to the start, and there's no guarantee you're making progress. It's super difficult to track, and how do you know if you're getting better year on year? So try and be consistent. Once you've got something that works, change it very slightly, very, very slightly, and only change it after you've stuck with it long enough so that you plateau. Next mistake I see people make very often is not warming up properly. Now, this becomes doubly as important as you cross the age of 50, because as I said before, if you're in your 20s or your teens, you can go into the gym, you can work out without warming up, and usually nothing bad will happen. Not so as you start to get a bit older. We all have sticky bits that develop. You might have a sticky shoulder that needs, a 10-minute warm up before you get in there. Your muscles often start off colder, they start off stiffer, they start off tighter. Maybe you're dealing with arthritis and you've got a joint that needs almost lubricating before you get started. All of these things need to be covered in your warm-up. But the other issue here is people often get their warm-ups wrong. And most people think that going and doing a warm-up is just sitting on the bike, cycling for 10 minutes, and then getting straight into your workout routine. A much better way to warm up is to do the movements you're about to do in your workout, but just with less weight. So let's say, for example, you're going to do a squat in today's workout, and you normally lift 40 kilos on the bar when you're doing your squat. Now, if I wanted to warm up for that, if you feel very cold, yes, you can do 5 minutes on the bike or the treadmill just to get the blood flowing, but then you would go over to the squats. You would first of all do 10 or 15 body weight squats, so no weight whatsoever, just to feel your joints moving. The next thing you would do is put a tiny bit of weight on the bar, so 5 kilos on each side, then do 10 repetitions. Again, just feel the warmth in your muscles. You're not trying to push it to the point where you're fatigued. You're just working to the point where you feel the muscles switch on and get warm. Then you might put on a little bit more weight and repeat. And then finally, you put on your full working weight. You do 2 or 3 reps, then put the bar back on the rack, just so your body feels what it's like to do that working set. That would be a wonderful warm-up. Now, if you're over 50, you might have to do that with each exercise you do, depending on how stiff you are. Once you've done a warm-up of squats, if you go on to do more leg weights, you probably don't need to do that again. But if you go on to do the bench press, which is a completely unrelated exercise, you will need to do that kind of thing again. I get it, it's tedious, I know it takes time, but it's worth it if you want to avoid that kind of injury. The other thing you might have to consider if you're over 50 is a bit of mobility work before you start. I know some people I speak to have very stiff knees, some have stiff hips, and if you know that's you and you've got a right knee that just doesn't want to move, you might have to spend 2 or 3 minutes just moving that knee before you do anything else. Lying down on the mat, bending it forward and back, trying to almost get the WD-40 in your body into that knee to get it mobile. Again, that is just something you might have to do. So please don't skimp on the warm-up, because again, an injury could set you back months or even permanently. The 8th mistake I see people make is avoiding eccentric work. Now, what's an eccentric contraction? Well, an eccentric contraction is that lowering phase of any exercise. So let's say you're doing a bicep curl. This is the concentric phase, the muscle's getting shorter, and this is the eccentric phase, the muscle is lengthening, and you're fighting against gravity to lower the weight down. And research has shown that eccentric contractions are particularly important for people over the age of 50. They're a great way to gain muscle and strength, but they're also a great way to avoid injuries, because many injuries in this population happens when you're trying to slowly step down from a height, you lose control and you fall. They can be particularly nasty because you're not just dropping your body height, you're dropping your body height plus however high the step was, and we want to avoid that in everyone who watches these videos. So doing eccentric work is vital, but the way I see people skip it without realizing is they'll do an exercise, they'll curl the weight up, and then they'll just let it drop down. So they're doing very fast repetitions. And what that means is that as the weight is dropping down, they're just allowing gravity to take it down with very little resistance, and the muscle's getting absolutely no eccentric contraction at all. Now, this is the case for any exercise in the gym. You can watch any exercise and you'll see an eccentric contraction in there. With the knee extensions, it's as you're bringing your knees back in. If you don't contract against the pad and slow it down, you could just let gravity take it in, and your quads would only get half the work that they would otherwise if you fought against the pads as gravity's bringing them down. In the bench press, it's people that are dropping the weight against their chest and then lifting it up. You see people drop it down fast and then push it up slow. Drop it down fast, push it up slow. That's a really bad way to do it. Not only does it increase risk of injury, it also means you skip that vital strengthening phase. So here's the key. When you're doing an eccentric contraction, I want you to try and take 3 to 4 seconds to lower that weight. So you come up, 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, down. Up, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, down. And you can do that with any exercise. And what you'll find is it will instantly become tougher. But that's not a bad thing, because it means that you're going to get stronger if you keep practicing it. It also naturally improves your form, so your form will get better. You'll get stronger with things that actually matter, like coming downstairs or walking down hills, and you'll gain more muscle and more strength faster. So what's not to love? So focus on that 4-second eccentric phase. I demonstrate it every time basically in my videos when I show an exercise. So if you're not sure, click on any of the videos where I show an exercise on my channel and it will show you exactly how to do it. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please do hit that subscribe button, because then you'll be the first to hear about our new videos when they come out, and it really helps the channel grow. So thank you so much if you do that. Okay, next mistake I see people make, and now we're on to the recovery mistakes. And this first mistake in this category is training too often. This is not just relevant for people over the age of 50. I fell into this trap recently as well. And what I'll preface this by saying is, for most people, if you do a bit more exercise, more is usually better, usually, okay, up to a point. And most people don't have an issue of doing too much, they have an issue of not doing enough, okay? If you look around in society, most people you speak to barely do any exercise at all. So it's great to find people who are eager to exercise, but you can go the other way, and it's actually easier to do so than you might think. I'll tell you my story first, and then I'll speak about how this is relevant to people over 50. So when I started a real serious gym program a couple of years ago, I started off going to the gym 3 times a week. I was getting okay progress. I increased it to 4 times a week. I was getting better progress. I increased it to 5 times a week. Again, slight increase in progress again. I was thinking, this is great. And I thought, could I eke out a 6th day? I increased it to 6. Initially, it seemed like things were going really, really well. Fast forward a couple of months, I'd plateaued. I wasn't improving. And I was thinking, what is going on? I'm going 6 times a week. Nothing's happening. Maybe I'm not working hard enough. Okay. Classic mistake. So I step on the gas even more. Okay. I up the intensity. I try and work even harder. At this point, I'm just not enjoying it anymore, but I'm still going. Not only am I not making progress now, I'm actually going backwards. I'm slowly getting weaker. And it wasn't until I took a step back and thought, what are you doing? You don't have enough recovery going on behind the scenes. You're going every day, apart from one, and that one recovery day is not enough for your muscles to recover enough to hit the next week. So I dropped it right back to 3 times a week and started moving forward again. Now I'm back up to 4. We'll see what happens. But this is a really common mistake, and I understand that it comes from a point of you just want progress to go faster. And I'm afraid that your body, your genetics, and your age now are going to be the limiting factors of your progress. And there's not much you can do to increase the pace that your results are going to come at. However, working more and more and more is not going to have the desired effect. It's going to take you in the opposite direction. And as we get older, and this is how it's relevant to you, your recovery takes longer anyway. So if at my age, 33 years old, you could manage 4 sessions per week, now you're 55 years old, you can probably only manage 3 sessions per week and recover from that successfully. And what I find is that for people who do respect those recovery days, even if they feel like they could do more, they still take an extra day or 2 of recovery. They often move ahead faster than the people who are going full throttle for 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and more. Now, the way this messes with your brain is when you first increase the amount you're doing, you will see progress quicker, which is what was happening with me, because it's a shock to your muscles. So for the first few weeks, if you go from 4 sessions a week to 5 to 6, you will get better, okay? But the lack of recovery very quickly catches up with you. So it's almost like a false improvement. You can't sustain it for very long. This is why choosing something that's sustainable long-term is key. Err on the side of a little bit less rather than more. And this is really good news actually for people who don't love exercise. They just want to do it as a means to an end. And I totally get that. you probably need to do less than you think. So start off with just 1 or 2 sessions per week. If you're seeing progress, stick with it. If you feel you could do more, think very carefully before adding in more days, more exercises, more time working out. Because if you're sacrificing recovery, especially if you're doing other stuff as well, like heavy gardening or running or cycling, whatever, that all factors into how much recovery you need. So what I'm saying is don't underestimate how much recovery you need. It's probably more than you think. The 10th mistake I see people make is not getting good quality sleep. Now, when you go to the gym, what you're doing with exercise is actually breaking down your muscle. You're doing it in a good way, okay? You're causing it micro trauma so that it grows back bigger. But the actual improvement and the actual growth happens at night when you're asleep. It doesn't happen in the gym. What you're doing in the gym is basically the opposite. You're causing micro trauma, and then at nighttime, your body repairs it and it restores it. But if you're not getting that nighttime sleep, that process is hampered and it's going to be suboptimal, and it definitely will affect your gains. Now, what do we mean by good quality sleep? Well, research has shown that adults of any age need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours sleep on average each night. And even if you're someone who feels recovered in a day after 5 or 6 hours of sleep, you're probably not functioning optimally. And there's some really scary data to show that when you're going to the gym and you're doing everything right, if your sleep isn't right, that one factor can completely inhibit all of your gains. So I can't stress enough how important this is. Now, sleep is such a detailed topic. It's too detailed for me to go into right now in detail. So I've got a full video in this style on sleep coming very soon. But as a couple of quick tips, you want to make sure your room is very dark. You want to switch off screens at least an hour before bed. You don't want to have late meals. Some people recommend stopping food 3 hours before bedtime. Don't drink too much before bed, either water or otherwise, because then you'll be up in the night to pee and that can affect the quality of your sleep. Use a sleep mask if you need to block out more light. I know that really helps with my sleep. And try and do something relaxing before bed. Reading a book, meditating, just sitting quietly for a bit. That will help you to get off to sleep faster. And then the final thing is temperature. Keep a cool room, and conversely, hot baths and hot showers also will help you go to sleep, because as your temperature drops, sleepiness sets in. So those are some quick tips. We'll go into those into more detail in a future lecture. If it's available, it will be on the screen now. If not, please subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to hear about it when it comes out. The 11th mistake I see people make is not taking a deload week. Now, what's a deload week? Well, a deload week, or a light week, which is another word for it, is basically a week where you don't do your normal program. You do the same exercises, but you do them at a very, very light weight and much less intensity to allow your whole body to recover. So let's say you're going to the gym, you're making progress, you're getting stronger, you do 6 weeks consistently, you're putting more weight on the bar, you're doing more reps, you feel like you're gaining muscle, but during that 6-week period where you've worked really hard, you've accumulated quite a lot of fatigue. Maybe your elbows are starting to ache. Maybe you're feeling more achy in your legs after a leg workout. Maybe your back's starting to give you a little bit of jip because you're starting to lift more and more weight as time goes on. All of these things are signs that fatigue is accumulating. And if you accumulate too much fatigue, you'll plateau and sometimes even start to go backwards. One of the best ways to prevent that is through a deload or a light week. And basically what it is you're not sacrificing your progress by completely not going to the gym, not doing anything, lying on the couch. You're still turning up, you're still lifting weights, but you're doing much less than you normally would. So you might cut your workout time in half, you might cut your weights in half, you might cut your reps in half, whichever way you prefer to make it very easy. So you're just going in, going through the motions, then going home again. What that does is it keeps muscle on your body for that week that you're not really pushing yourself, but it also gives your body a chance to recover and rebound. And this has been one of the hardest things for me to do as someone who feels guilty when I don't go and work out. Taking a deload week felt like a waste of time. but from experience, doing it allowed me to push much harder in the following 6 weeks. So it's not a waste of time, it's an investment in your future progress. And I would recommend that people over 50 take a deload week, probably every 6 to 8 weeks. That works pretty well. If you're pushing it up to 12 weeks, that's possibly too far unless you're very, very experienced. But taking a little break, 6 to 8 weeks, doing plenty of walking, eating plenty of food, just doing everything you can to support recovery is a fantastic way to make sure you push on again in your next phase. The 12th mistake I see people make is not managing their stress levels. Now, when you're stressed, you get a spike in a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is like a stress hormone, which is released in very high doses when we are scared. Say a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, then yes, you're going to get a big release in cortisol. And that's exactly what happened with our ancestors, which is why it still happens today. But the thing is, we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers anymore, okay? The most stress you're going to be faced with is probably an argument with someone or an unexpected bill turning up. But guess what? Your body doesn't know the difference. So every time you get something stressful happen, you get a dose of cortisol bumped into your system. The problem is, in today's world, is we get much more frequent doses of cortisol than we would when we were in our ancestral period, okay? And what that does is leads to chronically high levels of cortisol for many people. Now, if you leave this unmanaged, you can become almost like a nervous wreck, which is why it's super important to build in stress management into your day. Meditation, breath work, taking a walk in nature, all of these things work super well, and they will actually improve your muscle gains. Because if your cortisol is too high, it blunts the development of your muscle. And I've met people who are doing everything right, but just looking at them, you can tell they're super stressed. They're like this all the time. And you think, look, if you weren't so stressed, you'd probably be making more progress. How much time do you set aside for yourself? How much relaxation time do you have? Do you ever just run a hot bath and lie in it for half an hour? Probably not. You're always on the go. You're always stressed. There's always something to do, and there's always never enough time. And if you're one of those people, it's vital for you to build in some of that me time, some of that relaxation time to bring that cortisol down if you want to get optimum gains. Don't think of this as just, oh, an optional extra. It's absolutely vital if you want to make your best progress. So this next section is all about nutrition and lifestyle mistakes. And I've got 3 more major mistakes and then a bonus mistake at the end for everyone to avoid. So the 13th mistake is not eating enough protein. Now, protein is the building block of muscle, and we get protein through our diets. And basically, the protein comes in through your diet. Your body breaks it down into amino acids. Those amino acids are transported to your muscles and they're synthesized into muscle tissue. So when you work out, if you want to recover, if you want your muscles to heal afterwards and to grow, you need sufficient protein for that to happen. Now, because your body has 1,000,001 priorities over and above building muscle, it's going to use your dietary protein for other purposes before it uses it to build muscle. Your brain needs protein to run, your organs need protein, other functions in your body need protein first. So all of your dietary protein first goes there. And then if there's anything left, that will go to the muscles for them to grow and recover. Your body sees muscle mass as not essential to life. So basically it gets last priority, it gets last dibs. This is why eating enough protein to allow that muscle growth to happen is so important. And research shows that despite what you might read, older adults do not get enough protein in their diets. And there's many research papers to show this. I've posted one in the description box below if you want to check my facts. But people over the age of 50, particularly over the age of 70 and 80, are chronically under-eating protein. And that's one of the reasons why sarcopenia is such a huge problem all over the world. Now, how much protein is enough? Well, if you look at the government recommendations across many different governments, it ranges somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, just for human health, okay? If you want to stay alive, if you want to have okay health, that's probably sufficient. However, that recommendation does not take into account people who are trying to build muscle, which is why I feel it's too low for most people. If it's safe for you to do so, I would recommend increasing your protein intake somewhere between 1.2 and 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Seems to be a safe and relevant recommendation for most people who want to gain muscle, especially if you're over the age of 50. And some research papers have suggested that might not even be enough. 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram has also been touted as the correct amount. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. I can't tell people what they should and should not eat, but I know from personal experience, not eating enough protein will certainly put a halt to your muscle gain. Now, you can gain protein from a whole variety of sources. You've got meat, you've got fish, you've got eggs, you've got vegetarian sources like nuts and tofu and other things that I'm sure you can find. You can even get protein powders to support your goals, but obviously try and prioritize a whole food source of protein over and above supplements. But getting that protein intake in is absolutely vital if you want to do this, and it's probably the #1 mistake or shortfall I see in people over 50 from a dietary perspective. The 14th mistake is eating too little overall. Now, just like with protein, if you're not eating enough calories, and calories are basically just a way to measure the energy content of your food, your body uses those calories to keep your brain running, to keep your heart running, to keep your organs running, and there's nothing left over to contribute to muscle growth. So if you're in a chronic calorie deficit, you're losing weight over time, you're probably not going to be gaining muscle, because when you're losing weight, not only do you lose fat, you also lose a little bit of muscle mass as well, even if you're resistance training. That means if you're serious about gaining muscle, you might have to eat a little bit more than you normally do. Now, if you're already gaining weight, this doesn't apply to you. Okay? It means you're already in a calorie surplus. But if you're losing weight or your weight's very much the same, sometimes it drops a little bit, you're probably in a deficit, which means adding 200, 300 calories per day will support your muscle gain goals. So don't be one of those people that chronically undereats and then asks why you're not making progress. I've met so many people who are like that. You track their food intake for a day, they're eating 1,200, 1,500 calories, they're training really hard, and they're wondering why they can't gain muscle. It's because they don't have the required fuel to do so. Their body doesn't have the energy balance to allow that to happen. So you've got to be in a very, very slight surplus if you want maximal muscle gain. Not a huge one, not eating 1,000 calories more than you burn, but 200, 250 is about right to see progress. The 15th mistake I see people make that halts their gains is being afraid of carbs. And carbs, or carbohydrates, are basically your body's preferred fuel source. Now, when I say carbs, some people think, sugar. But carbs aren't just sugar. Yes, they can be broken down into glucose and glycogen that goes into your muscles, but complex carbs count as well. So brown rice, sweet potatoes, whole grain bread, things like that are excellent sources of carbohydrate that aren't going to be translated fast into sugar, but will support your energy demands. And the reason carbs are so important for resistance training is you obviously need energy to be able to push yourself hard. Yes, some people can do it off just fat and protein, but when I tried it, my energy and strength dropped so fast that my gains were slipping away from me. I wasn't able to gain strength. Increasing my carbohydrates made me stronger. It also supported my overall energy throughout the day. I didn't feel a carby crash. I know some people get that, but for many people that doesn't happen at all. And it is one of the best ways to support muscle gains. Carbs are also protein sparing. So if you happen to be low on your protein for a day, if you've hit a decent amount of carbs, you'll break down less muscle mass than you would do if you had low carbs and low protein as well. So don't be afraid of carbs. They're not inherently bad. I know people have all kinds of opinions about these things, but having carbohydrates rather in your diet is a vital way to keep your energy levels up and to keep you performing in the gym. Now, the final mistake I've got for you, and this is the bonus mistake, is expecting progress overnight. And this applies for everyone watching, not just for people over 50. But as we get older, gains in muscle and strength do slow down. That's no secret. It does take you longer to make the same progress that you might have made, you know, when you were in your teens and your 20s. It might take you twice as long now you're in your 50s, 60s and 70s. That doesn't mean you can't make progress. But what I want to reassure you is even if you feel like it's happening so slowly that you must be doing something wrong, you're probably not. It's probably just that it takes longer than you realized and it requires a little bit more patience. So please don't give up on it just because progress is slow. It will happen if you stick with it. If you eat enough protein, if you eat enough calories, if you very slowly progress either in weight or reps over time and you avoid all of these mistakes we've spoken about, I promise those muscle gains are there for you to have one day. So I hope that was useful. If it was, please do drop a comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear which one of these surprised you the most, or if you agree or disagree with any of these. Again, I would love to hear from you. And I really appreciate you watching these videos. It means the world to me to be able to do this for a living. So thank you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, and I'll see you again on the next one.